The wind howled through the broken posts of my ranch fence as dozens of strangers trampled over my fields, laughing, shouting, dragging coolers and setting up tents like it was their God-given right. I stood at the porch, arms crossed, heart pounding slow and steady, watching 60 people tearing up 4 generations of blood, sweat, and history, like it was just an open party ground. Karen, the HOA president, smiled at me from a folding chair she planted right in the middle of my pasture, like a queen surveying her conquered kingdom. "You should be grateful," she said. "Think of it as community outreach." I didn't answer. I just lifted my hand and, with one small motion, signaled 10 hidden snipers across the ridges, the hayloft, the tree line. It was the last smile Karen would wear for a long, long time. "Tell me something. What do you think happens when 60 trespassers find out they walked into a fortress instead of a farm?" When I pulled off the highway and rolled down the gravel road that led to my ranch, I expected silence. Maybe the low whinny of a horse or the rhythmic creak of the windmill that had been spinning since my grandfather built it in '62. What I didn't expect were the rows of sedans, SUVs, minivans, and even a party bus spilling out across my pastures, like some suburban flash mob had decided to throw a festival on sacred ground. There were tents, dozens of them, bright nylon things in yellows and blues, some half collapsed, others with strings tangled in my fruit trees. I saw children sprinting through my chicken coop, grown men hauling coolers over my irrigation ditches, and a full-blown grill operation going on beside my tractor shed. A woman I'd never seen before was applying sunscreen to her toddler on top of my barn cat's favorite sunning bench. I stepped out of my truck and felt the heat settle under my collar, not from the sun, from the rage crawling up my spine. I hadn't even made it 10 feet before I saw her. Karen, HOA president, suburban tyrant, and destroyer of peace. She was sitting on a plastic throne at the center of a collapsible banquet table, right in the middle of my hayfield, sipping from a wine glass like she was at a vineyard, and not squatting on land that had been in my family for 3 generations. She saw me and didn't even flinch, just raised her glass like we were old friends. "Mark, you made it! You're just in time for the opening ceremony." I walked slowly toward her, boots kicking up dust with each step. My fists were already clenched. "What the hell is going on?" She gestured lazily toward the chaos. "Community outreach. Family Day. HOA approved. Isn't it lovely?" I looked around at the disaster of folding chairs and cigarette smoke. Some guy throwing beanbags near my well pump. 2 teens making out on my hay bales like they were park benches. "This is my land." I said the words slow, like maybe she just needed to hear them spoken out loud. Karen gave a condescending smile. "Well, technically, that's up for discussion." "No," I said flatly. "It's not." She reached for a clipboard that had been lying next to her like a shield. "You weren't at the last HOA meeting, Mark. We had a vote. Section 7A of the revised community charter allows us to use underutilized properties for sanctioned events. And since your land isn't currently being used for any official livestock, agriculture, or community-registered function," I yanked the clipboard out of her hands before she could finish that sentence. "You think a neighborhood vote gives you the right to take my ranch?" Karen shrugged. "Think of it as collaborative stewardship." Behind her, a man with a Bluetooth headset yelled, "We're out of ice!" And someone from my back porch shouted, "Check the freezer!" My freezer. I turned, storming toward the house, and past 2 kids dragging hoses across the garden my mother built by hand. "Don't touch that!" I barked, but they just blinked at me, confused. Inside my kitchen, a stranger was pouring lemonade into plastic cups while talking loudly about refinancing. A different woman, no older than 30, had her bare feet on my coffee table, scrolling through her phone. My dog barked once from the hallway, cornered by a toddler who thought she was a pony. I stepped out, shaking, jaw clenched so tight it ached. I stormed back to Karen, clipboard still in hand. "Get them off my land, now." She didn't budge. "Mark, you're being hostile. There are children here." "They're trespassing," I growled. "All of them. We posted it on the HOA calendar 2 weeks ago," she said, feigning innocence. If you'd read your community bulletins. I don't have community bulletins, I snapped. I'm not in your goddamn HOA. Karen's smile flickered for the first time, but she covered it fast. Oh, see, that's not exactly accurate. Your ranch is within the expanded jurisdiction after last year's annexation. The boundaries were redrawn in October. No, I said. You submitted a request for annexation. It was rejected. The county signed off on it. My land's independent. She blinked. Well, that's subject to interpretation. I took a slow step forward, just enough for the tone in my voice to drop. Karen, get everyone off my land before I call the sheriff. That did it. The crowd behind her grew quiet, sensing something change. Karen's voice dropped to a near whisper. You won't call the sheriff. You know why? Because we already did. There's a disturbance on site and they're coming to deal with it. With you. I laughed once. Not from humor. From disbelief. You called the cops on me? For being on my own land? She looked smug now, drunk on her own delusion. You're being unreasonable, Mark. Hostile. Aggressive. We have witnesses. You broke onto my ranch, I said again, louder this time. People turned to look. You brought dozens of people onto private property, and now you're calling the sheriff because I had the nerve to show up? Karen stood, as if rehearsed, and raised her arms to the crowd. Folks, she announced, please stay calm. This is just a minor misunderstanding. Mr. Ellis has forgotten that the HOA now oversees regional land sharing protocols for community enrichment. We don't want any escalation. Escalation. The word settled in the air like smoke. And for a moment, I looked around at the sea of strangers laughing, stomping through my fields, taking selfies next to my family's century-old oak, and I realized this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about conquest. Karen didn't want to ask permission. She wanted to take it, and she thought she could get away with it because no one had ever told her no. She was about to learn what happened when someone did. I turned, walked away without a word, and went straight to the back of the ranch, to the hidden barn door beneath the trellis where the old root cellar used to be. I unlocked it with the key my father gave me when I was 20. Inside was the emergency prep room, a room he built during the war years and stocked for a different kind of enemy. I looked at the dusty crates, the locked cabinets, the long radio receiver mounted in the wall. I flipped the switch. It hummed to life. Then I opened the heavy, rust-stained cabinet in the corner, knelt, and activated the uplink. 10 red lights blinked green. They were ready. My perimeter was intact. My signals were live. They had no idea what kind of land they'd just invaded, and I wasn't going to tell them. I was going to let them find out the hard way. The next morning, I stepped outside to find my chicken coop's gate ripped clean off its hinges, feathers scattered like confetti across the grass, and 3 of my hens missing. One was limping near the oak tree, dazed and wide-eyed. The other 2, gone. The hoof prints near the pasture fence told me my mule had bucked and bolted sometime during the night, likely spooked by fireworks. Yes, fireworks. Because someone had the bright idea to launch Roman candles from my hay bales after dark. The burnt remnants of the casings littered the grass beside a half-crushed bottle of Moscato and a broken lawn chair. The smell of sulfur and smoke still clung to the air like a warning. I walked around the perimeter, inspecting the damage with slow surgical dread. My mother's flower beds had been trampled flat. Some idiot had parked a golf cart right through the rows of lilies she'd cultivated since I was a boy. My grandfather's tool shed, a structure older than most of the neighborhood itself, had beer cans on the roof, a cracked window, and a deep tire rut through the garden next to it. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wasn't angry. I was past angry. This was something colder, heavier, a truth settling into my bones. They didn't just trespass, they defiled. And Karen? She was doubling down. By noon, a new sign had been planted just outside my front gate. It wasn't mine. Whiteboard, HOA seal, stamped across the top like a brand. Future site of Oak Valley Community Recreation Pavilion. Sponsored by the Sunny Glen HOA. Underneath, in bold, coming fall 2025. My name wasn't on it. I hadn't signed anything. But there it was. a public declaration of seizure. I tore it out of the ground and threw it onto the road. An hour later, 2 men in matching polo shirts came by in a white pickup, planted a new one, and told me with smirks, "Karen says it's official now." I didn't answer. I just took their photos and walked back inside. 10 minutes later, I got an email. Not a message, an HOA violation notice. Addressed to me, from the HOA Compliance Department. Subject line: urgent. Multiple infractions. The email accused me of obstructing a publicly endorsed recreational development, refusing inspection, and intentional property neglect, which was rich, considering their guests had lit an illegal bonfire next to my barn and left empty beer bottles stuffed in my mailbox. The last line chilled me more than the rest. Failure to comply may result in temporary stewardship reassignment under Clause 14C. Temporary stewardship. That was their euphemism for land theft. They were trying to take my ranch, on paper, legally. I called the county office, demanded an explanation, and got passed from one board bureaucrat to another. Finally, a clerk in zoning admitted that Sunny Glen had submitted a proposal to utilize unoccupied land for shared use development. I asked her if that land was mine. She hesitated. "Technically," she said, "there's a petition underway to redefine its use due to community necessity." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Outside, a drone buzzed past my porch. Another one. Third in 2 days. No markings, no operator in sight. Just slow surveillance, recording, documenting. I pulled out my radio and whispered into the line. "Third one, Sector 7. Marked. Let 'em watch." My phone buzzed an hour later, another email. A fine. 1,200. Unapproved, fencing structure. They meant my property line. The one my great-grandfather had built with his own hands. The one the HOA now claimed violated visual harmony standards. I forwarded it to my lawyer, but I already knew what he'd say. They were flooding me. Financial warfare. I wasn't supposed to fight back. I was supposed to get buried under it. But Karen didn't know me. She thought I'd cave like the other landowners they'd picked off one by one. Those who lived just close enough to the HOA's border to be bullied into surrendering their acreage. They wore them down with citations, harassment, and legal smog. I wasn't them. Still, the community, the people who'd once waved at me in the market, asked for fence posts or tractor parts, had turned. I saw it on their faces when I went into town. Heard it in the whispers. "That's the guy who's fighting the HOA. Yeah, the one with the weird paranoia. Still thinks it's his ranch. I heard he pulled a gun on Karen. That never happened. But truth didn't matter anymore. Perception did. Karen had spun the narrative like a spider, webbing everyone who'd listen. I was the holdout, the angry loner, the unreasonable recluse. Some of them even joked that I was a squatter. If he doesn't like rules, maybe he should sell and move to the mountains. I overheard at the feed store. I left the grain and walked out. That night, someone painted the word, "Oh, a trash," on my front gate in red spray paint. Bold, lazy, misspelled. I left it there. Let the world see the kind of civility Karen's empire bred. The next day, I found a stack of printed flyers zip-tied to my fence. Join us, Oak Valley Community Barbecue. Free food, live music, and a special announcement from HOA President Karen Monroe. In small print. Location, Monroe Pavilion Grounds. That's what they were calling it now. Monroe Pavilion. My pasture, my land. I burned the flyers in the fire barrel behind the barn. Every sheet a slow funeral for sanity. The next evening, I found one of my horses injured, limping, a gash across her hind leg. Someone had tried to ride her, bareback. I found muddy boot prints and a crushed beer can near the gate. Her eyes were wide with fear. I wrapped her leg with shaking hands and didn't say a word, didn't curse, didn't yell, just felt the last thread of patience snap. They weren't just disrespecting me anymore. They were hurting the land, the animals, the memory of everything my family built. That's when the next HOA letter came. Not digital this time. Paper, hand-delivered in a gold-embossed envelope. Inside was a formal notice of community reassignment. Effective immediately, it said, The Oak Valley Homeowners Association will oversee maintenance, development, and scheduled use of the land currently referred to as Lot 1149A, formerly known as the Ellis Ranch. Formerly, they'd already erased me from the title in their heads. I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it slowly and slid it into the drawer next to my father's service revolver. I poured myself a drink, went out to the porch, and watched the sun dip low over the tree line. The wind was still, too still, like even the land knew something was wrong. In the distance, I saw a tent being pitched near the creek. More of them were coming. Karen wasn't bluffing. She was declaring war. And if she wanted war, I'd give her something no one had prepared for. I whispered into the radio again. Initiate grid preps. Tier 1. All stations go silent. A voice crackled back. Copy that. It's your show now. And it was. Because the line they crossed wasn't just about property. It was about legacy, blood, oaths. They took what was mine, mocked me while they did it, and smiled like I was powerless. But they forgot something crucial. I don't lose battles. I end them. I knew something was off the second I saw the official county envelope sitting in my mailbox, fat and heavy, like a warning. Most government mail doesn't feel personal, but this one did. My name was printed in thick, mechanical letters. The return address read, Oak County Land Reclassification Office. I tore it open on the porch, hands already braced for bad news. Inside were 6 pages of legal jargon, plat maps, parcel numbers, and one sentence that nearly made my vision tunnel. Lot 1149A has been conditionally accepted for community conversion pending final review. Community conversion. They weren't just squatting now. They were trying to convert my land into official shared-use property. The maps inside were digitally redrawn with the HOA's name embedded along the edges like ink scars. Their logo had been stamped over my acreage like it belonged there. I grabbed the phone and called the county records department, demanding to speak to someone who could explain. After a half hour of holds and bureaucratic tap dancing, I got transferred to a senior clerk named Sharon who sounded too tired to lie well. That parcel was refiled last week, she said. Came in under a supplemental amendment submitted by the Sunny Glen HOA Trust. Everything looked in order. That land is private, I said. It's been in my family for 74 years. The documents included a signed waiver and intent to convert statement, she replied carefully. Looked like it came from you. I froze. What signature? Mark Ellis, she said. Looks like a scanned original. Date stamped and notarized. I didn't sign anything. Not then. Not ever. And I damn sure didn't notarize a document surrendering my land. I drove into town that afternoon, straight to the records office. Sharon met me at the front desk with a manila folder in her hands and a wary look in her eyes. I probably shouldn't be doing this, she muttered, handing it over. But if it's fake, you'll need a paper trail. I opened the folder and there it was. My name. My forged name. In the crooked, half-cursive script of a liar trying to mimic someone who signs things with intent. The notary stamp beside it was real. I checked the seal. A woman named Melanie Withers. A name I hadn't heard in a while. She used to run a mobile notary service out of Sunny Glen's HOA office. She'd been seen at Karen's house more than once. I gritted my teeth and thanked Sharon. Off the record, she said as I turned to leave. They're fast-tracking this. Something about public good clauses. You've got maybe a week before. It's irreversible. That night I pored over every document, every fake signature, every altered boundary line. They had redrawn my property like it was a coloring book, shrinking the southern fence to make room for a proposed public path, adjusting the northern pasture to connect with what they called the Extended Community Recreational Corridor. It was surgical, professional, and someone had clearly paid a lot of money to make it look legitimate. I opened the back drawer of my desk and pulled out my father's deed, notarized in 1982, the one with the raised seal and hand-sketched boundary map he'd filed himself. The signatures didn't match. Not even close. But unless I got a court involved fast, the forgery would become law. Karen had moved from nuisance to criminal, and she wasn't slowing down. The next morning, I heard the engines before I saw them. 2 matte black SUVs rolled up to the ranch fence and parked like they were guarding a VIP. Out stepped 5 men, matching uniforms, dark sunglasses, tactical boots. They wore vests labeled Community Security, but nothing about them looked local. These weren't the usual HOA rent-a-cops. They moved like trained men, military posture, hands resting near the hip. One had a radio with a shoulder mic. Another carried a clipboard and scanned the perimeter like he was planning a breach. Karen stepped out from the second SUV, wrapped in a blazer that looked like it cost more than my first truck. She smiled like a realtor selling someone else's mansion. "Don't be alarmed," she called across the field. "We're just enhancing security. Some of the guests reported threats." "They're trespassers," I shouted back. "Every one of them. Community members," she corrected, "taking advantage of shared use privileges. And since tensions have risen, we've enlisted a private firm to help maintain peace." "On my land?" I asked. "It's not just your land anymore, Mark," she said sweetly. "This is about the bigger picture. Safety. Harmony." One of the men began walking the property line, examining my fencing like it was defective merchandise. I stepped forward, slowly, boots crunching dry dirt. "Tell your men to stay off my fence." Karen raised an eyebrow and nodded toward the man. He stopped. "For now." But I could feel the temperature shift. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. This was an occupation. That night, I scanned the security feeds and watched their patrol patterns. 3 of them circled the hayfield every 40 minutes. One lingered near the barn. Another sat on a folding chair 20 feet from my porch and didn't move for hours. Just sat, staring. Like he was daring me to come out. I didn't take the bait, not yet. Instead, I scanned their plates, took photos, and sent them through a database my friend in the sheriff's office owed me access to. 2 came back blank. The other 3 were registered to a defunct private security firm in Nevada. No website, no listed employees, no legitimate contracts filed with the state. They were ghosts. And they were watching me sleep. A day later, my internet cut out. No warning, no storms. Just dead. My cell signal dropped to 1 bar. My satellite radio flickered. I tried to call the ISP and got a voicemail. "Service disruption in your area. Expected restoration. TBD." I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The landline in the barn still worked, the old analog kind that Karen couldn't tamper with, so I called Elliot, my attorney. He picked up on the second ring. "How bad?" he asked. "Worse than we thought," I said. I told him about the forged documents, the signature, the private security. I sent him everything. He went silent for a long moment. "They're trying to build a precedent," he finally said. "If they establish de facto public use while filing for common land reclassification, they can claim eminent domain with enough support from the board. If no one stops it, the county might greenlight it. How do we stop it? Paperwork? Injunction? Historical evidence? We need to prove that your land is not only privately owned, but actively maintained with clear borders. You'll need witnesses, dates, photographs, every piece of history you've got." I already knew where to start. I climbed into the attic above the old workshop and pulled out the leather trunk my grandfather had kept locked since the 70s. Inside were blueprints, maps, signed cattle permits, water rights letters, and a faded black and white photo of my great-grandfather standing next to the original surveyor, shaking hands over the first fence post they ever dug. That photo would be worth gold. I scanned everything, cataloged every file, and sent it to Elliot. Then I printed copies and buried backups in 2 separate lockboxes on opposite ends of the property. If they wanted war, I was going to fight on every front, land, legal, and digital. But it wasn't just about proof anymore. It was about power. And Karen had made one fatal mistake. She assumed I was alone. She didn't know about the 10-man network I'd built over the years. Men I served with. Men who owed me. Men who didn't ask questions when I called. She didn't know about the grid. The silent defensive infrastructure built beneath her feet while she smiled for Facebook photos and held HOA meetings over sangria. My land wasn't passive. It was ready. And while she polished her lies and bribed notaries, I was calculating. waiting, watching, because I'd seen this kind of takeover before, not in suburbs, but overseas. It always started with maps. Then guards. Then silence. Then loss. But she picked the wrong battlefield. This wasn't a cul-de-sac. This was Ellisland. And if they thought a few forged papers and fake security guards would scare me off my birthright, they were about to find out what a real defense looked like. The day I started fortifying the ranch, the sky cracked open with a storm that rolled in like a curtain dropping on the last act of peace. Rain hit the dirt hard and fast, washing away footprints, tire tracks, and any illusion that this was going to end quietly. I didn't mind. The rain gave cover, and I needed it. While the HOA patrolled my fields and staged their little occupation theater, I was digging into something far older, far deeper, a plan born not in boardrooms or legal filings, but in the kind of quiet hours where men prepare for the worst and pray it never comes. My grandfather used to say, "Hope for peace, build for siege." He wasn't being poetic. He meant it literally. In the farthest corner of the property, beyond the old orchard, there's a hill no one ever hikes, covered in thistle, rough and ugly. Nothing grows right on it. But underneath that hill is a reinforced storm shelter, built in 1957, expanded by my father during the Cold War, and quietly upgraded by me after the first HOA letter ever landed in my mailbox 8 years ago. They thought I was paranoid. Let them think it. Under that hill was 2 tons of rebar, 3 diesel generators, 5 months of rations, and a weapons cache that would make a small sheriff's department nervous. I didn't build it to hurt anyone. I built it because I knew one day someone like Karen would arrive with a smile and a clipboard and try to rewrite reality around me. That day had come. I started calling in the old network one by one. First was Hank, former Army Corps engineer, now living out in Montana running a sawmill. I didn't have to say much. Just, "You remember the contingency we talked about?" He said, "I'm already packing. Be there in 2 days." Next was Torres, recon scout from my last deployment. Lives off-grid in Arizona. I texted him a single phrase, "Fortify the tree line." 2 hours later, he sent back coordinates and a drone flight plan. I don't know how he got it that fast. I didn't ask. Then there was Elliot. Not the lawyer, the other one, Elliot King. He used to handle quiet intelligence contracts for the state, before he decided the world was too stupid to save, and retired into a double-wide full of radios and encrypted files. I gave him a list of names. Within 24 hours, he had dossiers on every HOA board member, their spouses, voting records, tax liens, land purchases, and one particularly interesting real estate transfer from Karen's husband to a shell company in Panama. "She's dirty," Elliot said, "but she's not smart about it." "Perfect," I replied. I didn't need perfect enemies. I needed overconfident ones. While the HOA tightened their chokehold with more fake signs, bogus citations, and blaring community announcements about exciting changes to the future of Oak Valley land use, I was reworking the entire topography of the Ellis Ranch. The south field became a decoy. Old fencing removed. Clear pathways laid to lure people right where I wanted them. The real perimeter moved closer, hidden under camouflaged mesh and buried trip sensors. Hank arrived first, hauling a flatbed full of prefab steel barriers and sandbags. We worked through the night, rigging choke points with infrared beams and silent motion alerts. The power grid was split into 3 nodes, each one isolated in case of breach. Torres sent a package via private courier, pressure plates disguised as rocks, drone jammer grenades, and one nasty little trick I hadn't seen since Kabul: directional flash blasters, rigged with compressed air and magnesium flares. Non-lethal, but unforgettable. By the 3rd night, we had a working perimeter that could detect motion within 15 feet and lock down half the ranch in under 60 seconds. The barn was converted into a command node. Not military, not aggressive, just aware. Cameras rigged high in the trees, thermal sensors aimed at the HOA's usual entry routes, and a silent alarm that linked back to Elliot's server in North Dakota. Any breach, any movement, any drone flyby, he'd know before I did. And the best part? They didn't see a thing. Karen kept parading around my property, like she was hosting a harvest festival, her plastic smile plastered across local Facebook pages, posing with lemonade stands and teenagers in HOA volunteer shirts. Her posts were nauseating, grateful for this vibrant community and the opportunity to transform underused land into something meaningful. Underused. That was the word she kept pushing. Like legacy didn't count. Like 4 generations of sweat and livestock and funerals buried under that soil didn't count. Let her play pretend. While she cut ribbons, I was welding steel into the barn's foundation. While she hosted yoga on my porch, yes, they rolled out mats and brought a damn speaker, I was wiring up audio trip alarms that would mimic wild animal growls and shortwave frequency dissonance. Nothing dangerous. Just unsettling. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to make it crystal clear. You are not welcome here. You are not in control. The supplies started stacking in the feed shed. Water drums, field rations, first aid kits, flares, encrypted comm radios. I treated every corner of the ranch like a potential battlefield, not because I wanted to use force, but because I wanted to make it absolutely unnecessary. Let them see what they walked into. Let them realize, too late, that they chose the worst possible target. Karen didn't notice. Or maybe she thought it was bluster. She kept sending patrols, the private security guys in those fake uniforms with civic peacekeepers stitched in bold on their vests. They loitered near my gate, waved at my cameras, drank iced coffee like they were guards at a movie set. Sometimes they wandered too far, and a warning chime would go off in my earpiece. I'd wait until they crossed the invisible line, then release one of the non-lethal trip, FX, a burst of ultrasonic noise, just enough to scramble their senses. They'd stumble back, mutter something about signal interference, and retreat. Not once did they realize what they triggered. Karen filed more citations. Non-compliant land lighting, unauthorized architectural changes, failure to attend required HOA orientation. They even fined me for visual disharmony when I replaced the house shutters. The same ones her people cracked trying to break in 2 weeks ago. I paid none of them. Sent each one back with a single word stamped across the top. Rejected. My lawyer loved it. She's not trying to win in court, he said. She's trying to bleed you out, make you crack, make you lose your temper. Then, she's going to be real disappointed, I said, loading another batch of trail cameras into the gator. I hadn't cracked. I'd calcified. The HOA held a rally that weekend, their biggest one yet. Live music, tacos, a raffle. Karen unveiled a glossy billboard near my eastern fence. It had a smiling family standing in a green field with the caption, Oak Valley Commons, a future for us all. I stood on the other side of the fence, silent, arms folded. Not one of them looked at me. But I saw the glances. I saw the way the guards edged toward their radios. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't threatening. I was just there, watching, breathing, unmoved. They didn't know what they were stepping into. Not yet, but soon they would. Because the trap wasn't physical. It wasn't a net, or a flare, or a hidden wire. The trap was the illusion of control. I let them think they'd won. Let them believe the ranch was theirs. Let them laugh, post, cheer, dance, even hold a wedding in my pasture. Yes, a real wedding, with folding chairs and a DJ. I let them do it all. And while they desecrated the land, I finished building the box that would snap shut around them. A legal box. A surveillance box. A box made of everything they dismissed, ignored, and thought they could walk over. The day they found out what I really built was the day the war would end. I didn't have to fight. I just had to let them keep marching forward, straight into their own reckoning. The night of the so-called Oak Valley Community Festival arrived like a prophecy fulfilled. Every inch of my land that they thought they had conquered was now strung with the final threads of their undoing. Karen had spared no expense. Banners hung from the trees, Strung lights blinked across my cattle fence like it was Main Street during the holidays, and the sound of a live band vibrated through the ground under my boots. Food trucks lined my southern pasture. Tents sprawled across the fields like a virus, each one stamped with the Sunny Glen HOA logo. They came in droves, over 60 people, neighbors, outsiders, families with children, volunteers in matching T-shirts that read, "Building a Brighter Future Together." Karen herself stood near the makeshift stage, microphone in hand, smiling like a queen about to give her coronation speech. Cameras were everywhere. A local news station had shown up, their van parked crooked near my barn. I watched from the shadowed tree line, unseen, unmoving. The snipers were already in place, not real snipers with lethal intent, but a team of old friends with scopes, radios, and legal immunity. Every man stationed along the ridge, the hayloft, the bluff overlooking the southern entrance, was former military, law enforcement, or both, licensed, registered, brought in with quiet cooperation from agencies Karen couldn't even imagine were watching her. They didn't aim rifles tonight. No, they aimed lenses, high-definition cameras linked directly to a federal feed. They weren't here to scare. They were here to document every single criminal violation Karen had orchestrated. Illegal trespass, forgery, land seizure, unauthorized public gathering without safety permits, endangerment of minors, fraudulent use of private security companies, you name it, we had it all, and we weren't the only ones watching. At 7:30 p.m., the first wave arrived. 2 unmarked SUVs from the state attorney's office, parked just over the crest of the old irrigation road, lights off, waiting. At 8:00 p.m. sharp, 3 county sheriff's cruisers took up positions half a mile out, close enough to intercept, but far enough to let the noose tighten. At 8:15, 2 dark sedans with federal plates slid quietly onto the access road. No sirens, no lights, just the slow, unstoppable presence of real authority. I lifted my hand once, a single, silent signal, and the ridge lights switched on. 10 beams of industrial floodlight cut through the night, crisscrossing the fields in blinding sweeps, freezing everyone in place. The music stuttered, stopped. The crowd blinked against the glare, confused murmurs rippling through them like static. Then the loudspeakers kicked in. Not mine. Official ones, mounted to sheriff vehicles rolling in now with unmistakable authority. Attention! This is the Oak County Sheriff's Department. Remain where you are. Do not attempt to leave the premises. Panic hit them like a hammer. People stumbled backward, dropped drinks, clutched their children. Some tried to hustle toward their cars, only to be blocked by uniformed deputies stepping out with badges raised. Karen stood frozen on the stage, microphone dangling in her hand, her face frozen between confusion and dawning horror. Then the feds made their move. Agents in plain clothes but with unmistakable body language flowed through the crowd with precision, heading straight for the organizers, the so-called security teams, the HOA board members clustered near the main tent. I saw it all unfold from my perch, arms crossed, heart cold and steady. Every name on my list was targeted. Every individual who signed the fake land conversion, who filed the fraudulent notices, who trespassed knowingly, each one faced a pair of agents flashing badges and quietly, methodically, placing them under arrest. Karen didn't move. Not even when 2 federal marshals climbed the stage and flanked her. Not even when one calmly removed the microphone from her hand and handed her a warrant. Her lips moved silently, forming the words she couldn't say aloud. This can't be happening. But it was. And it was only getting started. The news van caught it all. Their cameras swung from the chaos of the crowd to the surreal image of Karen Monroe, president of the Sunny Glen HOA, being handcuffed in front of the very neighbors she had manipulated into standing on stolen land. Her face, that perfect smug face, twisted into a snarl as she tried to scream about rights, about miscommunication, about mistakes. But her voice cracked and vanished beneath the drone of the loudspeakers. You are trespassing on private property. You are in violation of multiple state and federal laws, complete with all instructions. The deputies moved fast, efficient, professional. One by one, people were lined up, IDs checked, cars searched. The private security goons? Turns out none of them had valid licenses to operate in the state. 2 had outstanding warrants in other jurisdictions. 1 had an expired concealed carry permit and a boot full of unregistered weapons. Karen wasn't just facing local charges now. She was facing federal racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful seizure of private property, and half a dozen other charges that would keep her in courtrooms until her hair turned gray and fell out. My lawyer, Elliot, appeared beside me at the tree line, grinning like a man who just watched a rigged casino get raided. "I told you," he said under his breath, handing me a slim thumb drive. "Everything's filed, civil and criminal, state and federal. They're not walking this one off." "Good," I said, my voice low, controlled. "They don't deserve to." Across the field, I saw neighbors starting to realize what had happened. Some broke down crying. Some shouted at the officers. Most just stared, slack-jawed, as the realization sank in. They hadn't been attending a community celebration. They'd been accessories to a crime. And every one of them was being logged, cataloged, documented. No more plausible deniability. No more hiding behind HOA newsletters and block parties. They had crossed into my land, into my life, and now the land itself had risen up to cast them out. Karen fought, of course. As the marshals led her past the news crew, she screamed about lawsuits, about countersuits, about political persecution. She called me a terrorist. She blamed the sheriffs. She blamed the marshals. She blamed the rain, the wind, the sun, but no one listened. Her voice was just noise now, lost in the grinding gears of justice, finally turning against her. They loaded her into the back of a black SUV and slammed the door without ceremony. The news anchors, sensing blood in the water, narrated the whole thing with breathless urgency. Longtime HOA President Karen Monroe, seen here being taken into federal custody after allegations of land fraud and unlawful seizure. I leaned back against the tree, arms folded, letting the scene burn into my memory. The floodlights made the fields glow like a stage, and the stars above, indifferent, eternal, watched silently as balance was restored. It took 2 more hours to clear the scene. Deputies escorted the last of the stunned festival-goers off my property, handing each a formal trespass warning as they left. Some cried, some cursed, some just walked in dazed silence, their illusions shattered like cheap glass. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The land spoke for me. When the last car drove off, and the last badge flashed under the last floodlight, I walked slowly back toward the porch. Torres and Hank were already there, arms crossed, faces grim but satisfied. Elliot climbed the steps, tossed the thumb drive into the air, caught it, and said, "You know you're a legend now, right?" I shook my head. "I'm just a man protecting what's his." He smiled. "Exactly." As the vehicles rolled away into the night, leaving my ranch finally, truly empty, I looked up at the stars again. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the land felt clean. Still, whole. I wasn't naive. There would be court dates, paperwork, hearings, maybe appeals. But the war was over. The occupation was ended. Karen's empire of lies was rubble. And my ranch, my home, was mine again, by right, by blood, by law. I sat down on the porch steps, feeling the worn wood beneath me, the breeze against my face, the scent of rain and earth rising from the fields. Somewhere beyond the ridge, an owl called out into the night. I smiled. It was a small sound, a simple thing, but it was everything. Justice wasn't revenge. Justice was restoration. And tonight, under the endless stars, justice had come home.